Box Elder, Cache, and Rich counties. And I've been a judge for almost 19 years. As soon as I took the bench, well, prior to taking the bench and receiving an appointment from Governor Leavitt, I did some research and looking into what was happening within the state with regards to drug offenses, and saw that Judge Dennis Fuchs started the first drug court here in Salt Lake, and that there were 3, maybe 4 other drug courts throughout the state. And so immediately when I had the opportunity, becoming a judge, I proceeded to start working with the drug and alcohol folks in our area, adult probation and parole, and the county attorney's office and law enforcement about a specialized court, a problem-solving court. And 17 years ago, we were able to start the first district drug court in Logan. Subsequently, 2 years later, we started it. I was able to get one started in Box Elder County in Brigham. We've had about 450, close to 450 graduates or people finish the drug court program. The concern back then, and still is the concern here today, is that we were seeing so many single mothers with children addicted to meth, and we had to do something rather than just incarcerate them. Wasn't doing any good. So we had to look at long-term counseling and accountability and long-term sobriety, so that we could help them become the kind of persons and mothers and fathers that they needed to be, and we could stop moving addiction and those criminal elements to the next generation. So we began that and worked through getting that drug court set up and going, and it's been very successful. It has a very low recidivism rate or reoffending rate. It's about 16 to 18% for our drug court, whereas if somebody's sent to the Utah State Prison, it's close to 70% recidivism rate, because they don't get long-term treatment and they have no job skills. When somebody's in drug court, they have to have employment or be going to school, and we do everything we can, and we have a great partnership now going with Workforce Services on job skills and training. And so that's just a brief overview of how it got started and where we're at. And thank goodness when Andrew's a thinker, okay? You're going to hear from him. He's very, very bright, and he's a thinker, and he had an opportunity to work with Randy concerning refugees in the community, and he came up with this idea to give a voice to the addicts and those in drug court. And Randy and Jennifer took those thoughts there and began to tell those stories. And they did. They came. They were thought to be. We had to have Randy introduce herself numerous times and start to build that trust so people were willing to talk with her. Because most of these people have just faced any authority figure has just been hard or trouble or problems for them. And so they gave a voice that I'm very, very grateful for, as far as Andrew setting it up and Jennifer and Randy, and just gave richness and context to their stories. They have incredible stories as far as where they've been and how their life's going and where they're at that point in time and their hopes and dreams. And so these people, a lot of them had just very, very tough backgrounds. And so that richness in that story can come out. And what it said as a result, what it's done for these folks as a result of what Andrew and Randy and Jennifer did, is that it said to those people, I matter. It's really what it's done. I matter, and my story matters. I'm just not simply a hopeless heroin addict, what I have to say, or a social outcast. what I have to say is that it really matters, and we're grateful for those stories. And through that, it said to these folks as they were able to tell their stories that I'm so much more than that. And you can really see the pride if you go and look at the project and what's been archived there through Randy and Jennifer at the Utah State Archives, USU Archives. You'll see that it comes out as far as the pride that they have and how well they're doing in their lives and the changes that they've made, and also their hopes, their dreams, their fears. When I go back and read them as a judge, I learn new things. Some of the things I've always been doing aren't good, aren't right, and they were very blunt as far as the things that happened and the things that I was doing as a judge. That doesn't mean we've changed everything just because a heroin addict wants something different, or a meth addict wants something different. But it's made us better to hear and see those stories. So thank you.
Do you mind doing Brock's part?
Doing what?
Brock's part?
What's Brock's part?
Oops, that's not it. Let's see.
That's Andrew.
Yeah, we'll come back to Brock's part. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. Brock Alder couldn't be with us here today. He's another integral part of our project. Well, I'd like to introduce you to Andrew Dupree, who really was the mastermind of this project, and who was with Jennifer and I from concept to completion. The concept was his, and through completion. So Andrew Dupree is going to talk about the idea of the drug court.
Hi. So I guess at the beginning of this project started with, as Judge Wilmore said, with my involvement with an organization that Randy is involved in Cache Valley, which is the Cache Refugee and Immigrant Connection, an organization that helps refugees in Cache Valley to integrate within our community. And she gave a presentation at the library that I attended, where the thing that really was profound to me, that impacted me, was something she said about giving a voice to these refugees who otherwise did not have a voice. And I was on drug court at the time, a participant in the drug court program. And so when I heard this presentation about the refugees who had a lack of access to jobs, social skills, just very basic social skills, and also were coming from countries where they didn't have the civil rights that we're afforded in this country. It struck me, and I saw many parallels between this refugee community and the drug court community. We sign away our most basic civil rights to search and seizure, freedom of association, and so I left that and thought about it for a long time, and I wanted to give a voice to myself and my community, and so I might say some political things here, but I think in explaining my reasons for wanting to do this project, I think it's pertinent. When I struggled with drugs, I was in a place of misery, frustration, and there were not any programs or such as detox or rehab or counseling available to myself. And so I see a real problem with that in our society, where we incarcerate more people for drugs than possibly in the history of the world. We, in this country, we incarcerate more people for drugs than the world has ever seen, and I think it's okay to want to fix that, to remedy that, to being incarcerated, being arrested, having all of your rights and freedom taken from you is something really intimate and personal and really traumatic. And I think as a society, it's okay for us as individuals to want to see a change in the political system, where maybe we offer more compassion and more opportunities or resources for rehabilitation before arrest. And so that's what I would like to see. And so when I approached Randy, that was much in the back of my head as something that I wanted to work toward or accomplish. And Randy really had this idea for the Oral History Project, and I thought that was a great way to really hear the voices of the people on drug court, because substance abuse, drug use is such a complex issue that going before Judge Wilmore for a few minutes at the stand when you're in court does no justice to the complexity of what we go through as drug addicts. And so yeah, as we found out through the Oral History Project, so many people who become addicted to drugs have experienced really horrible trauma in their life, whether it's abuse, sexual abuse, domestic violence, child abuse as children, rape, sexual assault, and it's really a coping method for so many people. And so my goal was to bring some awareness to drug court participants and their entire background story, or as much as possible, instead of this abstract thing where it's a blip in a crime log in the newspaper. So and also I also want to give credit to Judge Wilmore, who is an amazing man. My political thoughts aside, here was a man who, taking his background into account, coming from a conservative place like Cache Valley, Utah, who years ago, when public opinion was a lot different than it is today, where people were all for locking up drug addicts and throwing away the key, here was a man who said, let's be more compassionate. And given his background in conservative Utah, I give him all the credit in the world for that. And so, yeah, I think that kind of explains some of my background for wanting to do this project. And Jennifer and Randy were amazing, and this project was more than I could have ever hoped for. And even just with them, who knew nothing about drug court or the criminal justice system, it's brought awareness to them. So in that capacity, I'm happy and proud of the project. And yeah, I would encourage all of you to take a look at the collection.
Thank you, Andrew. So we just want to talk to you a little bit about our collection and what we did. So Andrew and Jennifer and I started. Andrew came May of 2016, and then May of 2017 we actually launched the project. As far as, that's not right, we completed the project. We have a complete online digital collection of the voices. And I'd like to introduce you to the voices. I'd like to just introduce you to Michelle. She is someone that we interviewed. We interviewed 12 participants of the Cache Valley Drug Court, 6 family or support persons, and then 10 folks on the Drug Court Committee, or the professionals, and Judge Wilmore will talk about those in a moment. But one of the cool things about oral history projects is it allows people to use that, and just like Andrew just mentioned, you can come into the drug court in a variety of ways. And obviously you could go to drug court, but as Andrew said, you're not going to hear the richness of a person's story because they're just telling a small piece of what's happened that week, and they're answering questions usually. And so in that oral history, we were able to ask questions that Andrew helped us craft, and they then can be utilized in research. They can be utilized, I mean, it is amazing that Judge Wilmore has been able to listen to these interviews, and it's incredible. It goes the gambit, doesn't it? Like, people over here have mentioned him being as a father figure to him, or to them, and then on the other gambit,
it's Hitler on the other.
yeah, it's the gambit, and you'd have to listen to all of them. And my mentor, Bert Wilson, always said, you don't just get into a community and interview 1 or 2 people. And so I've always said, you can't just interview me if you want to know about what, old ladies think about something. You've got to interview a bunch of old ladies. And so for us, we interviewed a fair representation of this community. Obviously, right now in drug court, is there 45, 50?
About 50 now.
50 right now. So we interviewed, a fair representation of family members and how it's affecting others. So I just like to play you a little bit of Michelle's story. This has actually been utilized by Utah Public Radio, so this is a crafted piece that they did. And you'll hear 4 voices. You'll hear my voice, Michelle's voice, Tom Wilmore's voice, and the reporter's voice. And this has all been used by Michelle's permission. We actually didn't take photographs with this collection. Michelle supplied this image. Michael, are there speakers on this? I just had that wonderment.
I don't do this that often.
Buffering.
This.
This is plugged in.
It should be. Yeah, it should be.
How many folklorists does it take to get
Yeah,
sound?
that's the oldest joke in the book. Do you have an internal speaker here, Randy?
I don't know. This is the. Oh, hello.
Hi.
Well, aren't you special? We want sound to come out of this.
She found herself more absent from her children's lives than she had ever been before.
There you go.
After
Thank you
serving
so
jail
much.
time, Reyes would begin the process of rebuilding her
how do I
life.
back
But
this
leaving
up?
jail often left her.
Because if I wasn't on drugs, I would have made these.
So 11 May 2017 at the Logan Market with Michelle and her 2 beautiful babies.
Michelle Reyes used on and off for 19 years. For the last 6 years, she had been in and out of jail on various charges, some of which weren't drug related.
And even though they weren't for drugs, I knew they were for drugs, because if I wasn't on drugs, I wouldn't have made these decisions. Every time I've gotten pregnant throughout all my use, I've always stayed clean, at least through my pregnancy.
Reyes says she refused to use in the same house her children were in, but when she left to use, she would stay away for longer and longer. She found herself more absent from her children's lives than she had ever been before. After serving jail time, Reyes would begin the process of rebuilding her life, but leaving jail often left her most vulnerable to relapse.
I did really good on my own for 2 months, and I was working graveyard shifts, and I just fell back into that routine of getting high, and it was the worst year of my life. I mean, there's so much chaos, so much chaos.
On Easter of 2016, Reyes' use kept her from being with her children. She decided then that she wanted to get clean. 2 months later, she was charged with distribution. When she appeared in court, she was pregnant with her 7th child. She was offered the option to delay her sentence, jail time, for 8 months to give her time with her new baby. Her only other option was drug court. Judge Thomas Wilmore, the judge on Reyes' case, helped to bring drug courts to Cache Valley in the 2000s. He says that when drug courts first started to emerge in the 80s, the idea of a court that was designed to rehabilitate rather than to punish was actually kind of controversial.
You just think about that for a minute. A court is there to solve problems. Most of the time, since the development of the criminal justice system, it's always been there to punish bad behavior, punish the breaking of the laws.
The program has 5 phases: individual therapy, group therapy, participation in Narcotics or Alcoholics Anonymous, required full-time work or school, and probation. It takes about 1.5 years to finish on average and costs the participant about $3,000. Reyes says that if you're not ready to get clean, drug court can be an expensive way of setting yourself up for failure.
I looked at it as a gift and took drug court, and I'll tell you, I've never been early in my whole life. I've never made it to any appointments ever, and if I do, it's never on time. I really thought I'm gonna just end up getting sent to prison, because I can't do this. And I finally had to make the commitment to getting clean. I always said I wanted to get clean before, but I never was really truly ready. I got clean March 27, 2016. I've been clean over a year. And I know if it wasn't for drug court, I would have relapsed. I couldn't do it on my own. I needed these programs. My baby will never know the life of having an active addict for a mother. And I won't ever want him to have to know that.
Her family life has continued to improve since getting clean. During Reyes' last 6 months,
that was over an hour interview, and it's excerpted down a little bit. And it's interesting, when you're trained to do field work, you're trained to control the sound, control the environment. But when you're interacting, and we were in the Logan Library, Jennifer and I, and Michelle came with 2 babies, and they were young. What you hear in the background is her cell phone with a Moana. There was a kid show on, and I don't know, but I can't hear Jennifer's interview or even that and not be back in that moment and actually realize, this is a mother with 2 small children with her, and she has 5 other children. And there's so many cues to me, and I bet you Andrew and Jennifer and the judge and I could unpack this for you, but just like being on time. It might mean something to you that means a whole lot of different things to the 4 of us, because you got to be on time to drug court.
Don't you go back to
You go back to the holding cell if you're not on time to drug court. So she's saying some coded things. So these interviews have a lot of coded language in them, a lot of coded language. And you'd need an expert like Andrew, the judge, to really explicate it all. But nonetheless, that information is there and available for someone like the UPR reporter, or a person who is reviewing, working on a thesis about courts. And you know what, that has happened. A colleague of mine and all of ours from Utah State, Stephen Van Geem, he did his dissertation on mental health court. And so interviews of this sort can actually help and do help with the history of a place. And local does matter. Jennifer did a little searching, and we don't know of another drug court oral history project in the nation that we can find. So Andrew, you started something really incredible and powerful. Do you mind talking a little bit about the committees?
Sure.
Thank you.
The drug court is a collaboration where we bring together, as you can see, the judge, the prosecuting, and the defense. Okay, and that's just incredible right there. And then probation, law enforcement. When we first started drug court, law enforcement was dedicated. They thought it was a kiddie court or a hand slam, something like that. And we had to, that's why it took me about a year to get everything in place to get drug court started, because I was just dealing with these preconceived ideas of what needs to be done with addicts and the problems there. The most important people involved in the drug court team are the treatment folks with Bear River Drug and Alcohol. I mean, they're the ones that are doing all the work. I just see the folks once or twice a month, as Andrew says, for a few minutes each time I see them. But they're sitting down with a counselor once a week and also a drug court coordinator, making sure and answering any questions, things like that with them. And then if we do have, well, quite often we have mental health issues that we have to deal with, and we also have Bear River Mental Health up there in the northern part that works hand in hand. Sometimes not as well as we hope. As sister agencies, they don't talk, and I just still don't get that about government, okay? I just don't understand why government can't cooperate between agencies. And the same thing happened for years and years with workforce services. We're trying to get these addicts with jobs and training. They come out with, well, they have felonies on their record and problems and issues like that. And so, they're working minimum wage at McDonald's. And finally, with Governor Herbert, we've gotten workforce services to work with the drug court and adult probation and parole, so that these agencies, all part of the executive branch, are working for one common good, and that is to get the training and also the job resources where they need to be. If you came to drug court, you would see, well, prior to drug court, every week, that committee meets by themselves just to cover the problems, and then they come over to the court and they meet with me and they're coming up with thoughts and ideas of how to deal with somebody who's missed an appointment, or somebody who has tested positive for methamphetamine, what treatment needs to be ramped up, and things like that. And then before drug court, they'll meet with me for about an hour and 15 minutes. We'll go over all the problems, what their recommendations are. The ultimate decision is left with me as the judge, and I'll listen and work in what I think's best there. And then not only are we talking about problems, but we're talking about the good things that they're doing in their lives, so that when I go out there, I can say, with positive reinforcement, trying to help build them up. If you came to drug court, we clap, okay? And you just don't see that in court, but we clap. How long you been clean? 300 days. Wow. How long you been clean? 2 days. We clap, okay? Trying to give some positive reinforcement. We have quotes in a fishbowl with a few prizes in there, like a free urinalysis, okay? You ought to see it. You ought to see their faces when they get a free urinalysis test. They don't have to pay $15 for that one, okay? It means a lot to them. Or a candy bar or something like that. When they phase, we give them gift certificates of a limited amount. So they go through 5 phases, and each phase builds up lessons as far as how often they have to report to court, how often the curfew goes up. They all have 8 p.m., 9 p.m. curfews, and then it could go up as they move up and through the phases. And also their urinalysis testing start to decrease as they move through the phases. And then we have a great community support up there through the 12-step programs, Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous. Some people don't want to participate in them because of their beliefs and thoughts, and so we allow them to not participate in the 12-step programs, but can do other things such as community service. We now have a program up there that's called Addicts to Athletes, okay? I don't know where it was started. I think it was started somewhere in the nation, and began down in the Provo area for Utah. But anybody who wants to, and you don't have to be a weightlifter or something like for Addicts to Athletes. If you just want to go walk with them, you can go on a walk. But they meet a certain night every week. They go for runs or walks, and it's just good to see that good health behavior, because what we're trying to do is rebuild a life. These lives have just been devastated, and so we're doing everything we can in that respect. But we have a great partnership with the 12-step programs. We've seen great success in the community with those. We're supported by also a nonprofit called Friends of Drug Court. It's a nonprofit that has had money donated to it, and then they can help with such things as housing or other bills that may be coming up. Housing is always a problem for addicts. Many of them, not many, but some just don't have the ties to the community, and so getting that housing is critical, and we're still not doing a very good job with that with our governmental services in the northern part of the state. And we also have a strong mentoring group at this point in time. Graduates of drug court, they meet with the participants in drug court. It's mandatory that they go once at least to that mentor group and have somebody like Andrew that's been through it answer questions, because they can ask those questions of me and others in drug court, but you know, they can say, what in the world is that knothead judge talking about when he says this, okay? And that mentor can tell them and explain to them what's going on there. I think that's it. Anything else you wanted to tell?
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Well, you can see drug court is a lot of people involved. It's 5 phases, and one of the things that we, Jennifer and I especially, but also working with Andrew and with the judge, he kept saying, what are you learning? What are you learning? And so Jennifer and Andrew and I have talked about what we've learned, and Jennifer, Duncan, head of special collections, is going to talk to you about that.
So usually I don't read directly, but a couple of people who saw me before talk about drug court saw that I can get really emotional about this. So I'm just going to read, and because I know that historians often do that, I don't even have to be embarrassed about doing that in this audience for sure. So when speaking about this project, Randy has usually asked me to be the one that's going to share a few takeaways and themes that we've observed and thought about as we completed the interviews. And for a group of historians, I wanted to talk about our project a little bit more theoretically than I have before. And I'm going to do that by briefly acknowledging that we as librarians and archivists are finding ourselves in a time where, as professionals, we need to have a moment of serious self-reflection. We need to think about the considerable power that we have to document our cultural heritage. And that's a topic that's coming up at all kinds of national level conferences right now. So for example, here I've got the program from the 2016 Rare Book and Manuscript section of American Library Association. And the conference theme, 2016, was opening doors to collaboration, outreach, and diversity. So much like this conference where we are today, that conference sought to examine the way that we as professionals should seek to document the history of our local communities in all their richness. The conference really pushed us to think about whose stories are being left out of future historical narrative. And then through the collection development choices that archivists and librarians are making, future scholars will have access, or they may not, to the sources required to answer historical questions. The questions you are answering now as historians are largely reliant on these same choices that archivists and librarians have made in the past. And it's incumbent upon us as keepers of these cultural resources to allow, in fact, really to encourage our collections to be shaped by our local communities as they're existing today, incorporating the most diverse possible body of information. In fact, as I think of our collections at USU and other collections with which I'm familiar, many of the most prized materials reflect the vision of curators who identified and collected materials from communities that might have otherwise been perceived as outsiders. So this idea that Andrew has pushed us to consider hearing the voices of the underserved and underheard is really where we need to focus a lot more of our attention as professionals. And as Randy mentioned, as far as I can tell, this is a unique collecting project. So Randy mentioned Andrew's idea for an oral history of the drug court approximately 18 months ago at a staff meeting, and I was immediately moved by this idea. I knew telling the stories of members of this community was a significant part of the history of northern Utah today. When I tell many people that I work in special collections at USU, they may have a stereotype of the types of things they might find in our collection, what it means to document the history of the US West, and what it means to be a special collection. But I'd be really surprised to learn if there's anybody in this room that hasn't been touched by addiction in some way. That might be yourself, that might be a family member, a friend, your neighbor, your coworker. There's somebody that I'm sure you can think of right at this moment that has touched your life in that way. And at minimum, I'm sure all of you are aware of the crisis of opioid deaths that are currently facing the state of Utah. So in 2001, there were 154 opioid deaths in Utah. Last year, there were more than 408. And we're on track to surpass that this year. So this is something that's really going on in our community right now. Documenting this crisis as it touches Utah is part of our professional responsibility. It's our job to document our present-day community, and these stories will be a critical component to telling the story of this place at this time. And it would be impossible for us to deeply document this history through only government reports or court cases or newspaper stories, without significant contributions of the collaboration of the community that's actually experienced this world, like the drug court. This story won't be told well. Hearing the recordings of the voices of the Cache Valley Drug Court is much more powerful than simply reading the data or reading an impersonal newspaper article. So both personally and on behalf of Utah State University, the Merrill-Kazera Library, and Special Collections and Archives, I want to thank everyone who's been involved in this project and who's given so generously of themselves, really personally of themselves. Our colleagues at Utah State have been really inspired by the stories that we've heard. So that's kind of the historical takeaway. I'm going to give you a few more kind of unorthodox takeaways from my experience working on this collection. Things that might make up a story as it's told by historians in the future. So first, and I think Andrew's kind of touched on this, the community touched by addiction and recovery is incredibly diverse. When I first spoke to him, one of the things he mentioned to me and to Randy was how he wanted people to really know the people on the drug court as more than statistics or names in a crime blotter, more than stereotypes. And I felt like I understood that when he said it to me in that moment 18 months ago, but really sitting in a room talking to this number of people, I know these people a lot better. I understand their stories a lot better, and I feel like I really can see the diversity in that community a lot more than I really understood before. Second, once we started the interview process, we learned that completing drug court is really hard work. Like, I don't know that I could complete drug court. It is really an incredibly big challenge to do the kinds of things that the participants are required to do. But many of the people who were participating, they likened that process to scaffolding for life. We actually heard that term, scaffolding, a couple of times, because a lot of people who are going through that may have never really been exposed to basic skills that you need to get through life. And this court does give many people the opportunity to develop this. We've all seen the idea of scaffolding around a building, something that provides support. Once you finish drug court, all of that kind of falls away and you're left to stand on your own and hopefully as a much stronger person. So as I said, it is really hard work, and it's hard work on yourself. You're working on yourself. This really provides a space and time for people to do that. Many people have never had that space and time to do that. And it leaves people feeling empowered, many people empowered and grateful to have tools and skills in order to really move forward with a more rewarding life. However, hearing about the many, many struggles related to race, class, socioeconomic status, and gender is really illuminating of our present-day society. Third, many of the participants shared ways in which drug court could be improved, and you've already alluded to a couple of things that have already changed. One aspect we heard about from several participants were challenges of coordinating with DCFS, and it sounds like that's just going to be an ongoing struggle. The Department of Child and Family Services, right. When you're on drug court, you can't associate with other people who are on drug court or who are known drug users. If you've got two parents who are drug users and they're trying to parent their child, that becomes incredibly challenging. So the idea of limiting associations is really difficult for people. However, you can kind of see why you'd want to keep people who are using drugs apart. So that's an ongoing struggle for people, and it's an ongoing problem for the court, how to resolve that kind of relationship. The idea of the 12-step program, some people really push back against that because it doesn't, the 12-step program, of course, relies on embracing a higher power, and many people don't, that just doesn't fit with their worldview. So I feel like the court's doing a great job of really trying to turn that around, look at other options to build that kind of structure and responsibility into people's lives. And then, of course, the financial challenges. So you guys all kind of laughed when Judge Wilmore mentioned that $15 UA. Well, imagine you're doing the $15 UA 5 times a week, week after week after week, and you've got a minimum wage job. I mean, there are a lot of charges. Imagine you have to wear an ankle bracelet that you're going to have to pay to have taken off. You have to pay to phase up. There are a lot of charges associated with drug court, and if you don't already have an awesome job or some financial security, it is a sincere and serious challenge to make it through. Fourth, many people discussed the support they felt from the drug court process. And we really attempted to document, you saw in the previous slide, a lot of different voices from participants, family members, people at a group called Recovery Cafe, mentors, all kinds of different people that do provide that support for the people going through. And then finally, I just think, and this is where I'm just gonna read. I just really think the biggest takeaway that I had from the project was the inspiration that I felt hearing the stories of these individual men and women. It was really humbling. And these people are really amazing. They do an amazing job of balancing what's already a difficult life. I'm just going to say thank you, Andrew, for bringing this project into our world. So we're all better for it. Thanks.
Well, we're finishing up. A couple of things I would like to just say. This idea of advocacy, there's the work that we do, and Jennifer beautifully talked about how this work intersects in our archive. And that really has been my life work for the last 20 years, to bring the voice of the underserved. And that really is something I gained from my mentors, Barry Tolkien and Bert Wilson, to bring the people who you aren't seeing. And I love the keynote speech today from Ken, to look around and what aren't you seeing, and try to find that and make sure that's available. And I think the charge of all librarians, archivists, historians, folklorists is to make sure we are capturing the stories of those people who are going to maybe fall through the cracks. And I just so appreciate, as Jennifer said, Andrew and the judge, and also others who have helped us organize this, but especially Andrew. And a little side note to this is we've met about 3 other times, the 3 of us, after we finished. We did the interviews and we had them transcribed, and they were all vetted. And it's a beautiful digital collection, which I guess I should show you. I forgot to do that. But we've met because, Andrew is a thinker, and I think Judge Wilmore alluded to that. And he has ideas of things that could, excuse me. Remember that old lady quote? I have to get my glasses on to see. So we have this beautiful digital collection where you can go and hear these rich stories, these life experiences, and they're the gambit, because we've interviewed people that are very far along in the drug court, and then people who are in phase 1, who frankly were super mad. And I'm not phase 2 or phase 3, and the story softened or changed a little bit. And so working with Andrew is opening eyes of advocacy avenues and ways that we can maybe be more aware. And that is a great thing as a human being, but really is a really important part as an archivist or a historian or a person who is champion with guarding and gathering culture and heritage. If we aren't passionate, and if we aren't working to hear the voices, I mean, Andrew will tell you, the day he came in to meet with me, I'd never heard of drug court before. And I said to the judge, how many times have I driven down First West and past the courthouse? And now I'm there all the time, and I always think to myself every time I'm there, this has happened for 17 years, every Tuesday.